So some time-saving strategies. If you are teaching a class with a lot of students, I think that it is hard to know how much time to spend on each essay, and it's hard to have a life as a graduate student. It's hard to have a life as a teacher. Seems like that every evening and weekend is just filled with grading. And that's what I think, and we hate grading because it takes up our time when we wish that we were with our families or with our friends. So I have a few different strategies, and the first one is to glance at a big batch of the essays before grading individual papers. Yes, it will take a few minutes, maybe even up to, let's say, an hour. And so you think, gosh, I've spent an hour with these papers and nothing's graded. What a waste of my time. But I am arguing that it will save you time in the long run. In fact, what I do, and you don't have to, of course, is read through a whole bunch of them or all of them really quickly, and I put them in 3 different categories. Woohoo! And ugh. Those are my 3 categories, and I put them there kind of keeping my assessment in mind. I have a really strong sense, even after just a glance, what the best essays are going to look like. And so I know going in to the meh essays, how kind of their grade is gonna look. That I won't have false expectations or my ideal essay. If I were to write the essay, this is how it would be, and this is an A. Probably none of my students are going to write to that. So am I automatically penalizing them for not being me? You know, that the good essay would only still get a B, and it just goes down from there. So that's what I do. I get a sense of the quality of the assignments before assigning grades. And I didn't put this on the sheet, but I'd also like to add that if every student is making the same mistake, or I don't know, 80% of your students are making that mistake, I'd say maybe consider not marking anyone down for it and having a lesson in class about it. That means that they didn't get it. That was on you, no offense, where you go, I didn't spend enough time on this in class, and so they shouldn't be penalized for it. Maybe your 1 or 2 top students did it, but they might have done it even without your instruction. I say don't go overboard on your comments or corrections. Consider setting a time limit for each student's paper, and you're going to have to be the judge of that, but I use a kitchen timer, and I will know then, after a batch of essays, how many hours it will take to grade. And so I will set that up in my schedule that today from 4 until 5:30, I'm grading. So I don't have any of these 6, 10-hour grading sessions because I get grumpy, because I don't think that I'm as fair going into students' papers after reading a whole bunch of them. And so this will keep you reading, it'll keep your comments to a minimum, and it'll make you think about your comment before you spend time writing it. Is this really worth writing? And I think that that's really valuable, especially when we're thinking about proofreading and doing those sentence level corrections. We see time and time again teachers who go through and they will just copy edit a student's paper. Just every single error, they go through and they mark it. Either they correct it or they just put circles in every single place. And I just think, wow, that took a lot of time. And if the student is a really amazing student, perhaps, they'll go through and research each of those circles to find out exactly why you marked that. But I bet you they won't. I bet you, especially if they don't get a chance for revision, they'll flip it to the back, look at their final grade, and be done. And you just spent a whole lot of time doing a whole lot of extra work. So I would say, again, we get to the next point, which is when you are looking at those sentence level corrections, choose one or the other of these 2 strategies. 1, choose a pattern of error. That's something that we talk about in the Writing Center, which is somebody maybe doesn't know how to use a semicolon. They used a semicolon in places where a semicolon belongs, also where a period belongs, and where a colon belongs. They just pick a punctuation, like on a wheel, just period this time, and so you would just go through and mark the places where they misused the semicolon. That's a pattern of error. They were consistently doing it wrong throughout the text. Or against sentence fragments, maybe that just drives you bonkers, right? I know that run-ons drive me bonkers. It's just a thing, right? And so I might go through the paper and mark every time the student did a run-on, and then say, at the end in my markings, I would say, I marked every place where you had a run-on sentence. Please come and see me if you don't know what that is, or please spend time on Grammar Girl or one of these websites, or the Purdue OWL, to find out how to address this mistake. So that's a pattern of error. If you don't see maybe a pattern of error, but you see just lots of errors all over the place, you might choose to do corrections on just the first page, maybe the first 2 pages. I don't know, maybe the first paragraph, depending on how many minutes you set on that kitchen timer for each assignment. But what that will do is show the student that, yes, there are problems, there are sentence level problems, and they need to address them. And you can put in your comments at the end, I only marked the errors on the first page, but there were errors throughout. Please seek help, right, before submitting this again in my class. I say, am I wanting to teach my student how to avoid making this error in the future? Or do I want to edit the paper myself? And I'd say probably your answer is, I want to show them how to avoid making the error. And maybe even you don't feel like you want to do that, that there are other more significant problems in the paper, and your primary concern is not how to avoid making errors with semicolons, but that they didn't understand something in your class, right? And you want to spend your time with that student instructing them on those things. On the back, if you are writing comments at the end of the paper, consider the compliment sandwich. I think this is really funny. When I think of a sandwich, a ham sandwich, right? That's bread, ham, bread, with some other stuff probably in between. But a ham sandwich is the thing in the middle. So you'd think a compliment sandwich would have the compliment in the middle. Well, I've been to multiple writing centers, and they call it the compliment sandwich, and that's just inaccurate because the compliments are the bread in this particular little practice, I guess, that we do in the writing center. So we start out with something positive. So whether that's, I really enjoyed the topic that you chose, or your take on this particular article, or you choose one of these 5 things. The focus was especially clear. What an amazing thesis statement. Something that's going well in the essay. And then that middle piece is whatever is lacking or incorrect or confusing, the thing that wasn't working in the text, and then end it with something positive again. And this doesn't have to be like, a lot of instructors who hear me say this are like, oh my gosh, it's so touchy-feely. And it kind of is, and I don't mind that it kind of is, but I know that in my own experience with working, especially in my grad work, I actually haven't read the final comments on one of my papers from grad school back in 2006, because it hurt every time I read the comments from this instructor. I felt awful about myself as a scholar, as a writer, basically as a person, right? Because the comments were just so hurtful, just awful. I'm obviously reliving it right now, sorry. And then I had another instructor who was really positive. Man, this is an amazing thing that you did here. I've never heard this argument, or I don't know. It was just really positive, and I took the criticisms better. I wanted to improve that, and I actually wanted to read the teacher's comments next time, And so I guess I try to remember that when I'm doing tutorials in the Writing Center, when I'm training teachers, when I'm grading my own students' work, is that they're experiencing that too, right? So they want to know something that's working before they hear what's not. And I think they're more open to what's not working when they know that they did something successfully. And back to the rubric conversation, actually, rubrics do that without having to write comments. Because imagine a rubric, right, that has your 4 different categories, and it's 1 to 10. right? And they can see a visual representation of what's working and what's not by what number is circled, right, on the page. They can see that something is done very, very well. And I would say with the thing that they're doing well, I wouldn't even mind giving them a pretty darn high score on that. They can see that they're doing it well. And then the thing that they're not, they see it visually drop down to a 3 out of 10, that their sentence level things or their organization is just funky, right? And they need to address that in their next revision or on their next paper for your class. So I think that the compliment sandwich or this type of feedback works out well within a rubric. I like typing out my comments so that I can reuse some of my own sentences or phrasing for common problems. So I'll realize in a class of 40 that I am saying a lot of the same things over and over and over again. And writing it out by hand is just, it's painful, first of all, and annoying on all these different levels. And I would say that you might consider, as a time saver, typing out your responses to students, maybe stapling it onto the back of their papers if it's a physical class and not an online class, and then just bringing over, in fact, sometimes full paragraphs, so that your first few essays that you're grading, you are writing out the comments, right? Which I'm faster at typing anyway than I am writing out comments by hand. But you'll write out maybe your 2 or 3 different things you want to say, and then you'll find that a student later on has those same issues, positive things or negative things, and you can just move it on over, copy and paste, maybe change the examples or the specific sections from their text that highlights the thing that you're saying, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've already written that, and so you'll get really fast with your comments, and they get substantial comments, a full page of what's happening in their text, and it only took you 5 or 10 minutes to read the whole thing and put in the comments. So I do that quite a bit. I say work smarter, not harder. So those are some grading suggestions, I guess, as you're going into grading writing. Be really consistent, show students what you're looking for, and then kind of stick to it. Use positive feedback alongside the negative, and just be aware of what your marking is for. I think that's important.